This is the Marxists at the Movies podcast.
Scene opens, white lights dim down low. The cinema whispers where truths can grow. From shadows deep and screens ignite, the proletariat comes alive tonight. Marxists at the movies, bright and raw, breaking through the reels to rewrite the law. Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting the name.
Hi, comrades. Welcome to Marxists at the Movies. Tonight, we're not just passively consuming, right? We're diving deep into the Terminator saga. And, this series, it's practically overflowing with these potent allegories of class struggle. And I think it really forces us to confront the dangers of technology when it's allowed to just run amok, right? Unchecked. But a fair warning to all of you out there, if you haven't seen these films, well, consider this your spoiler alert, because we are going to dissect these plot points with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. And tonight, it's part one of our little Marxist reading, so our focus is going to be laser focused on the original trilogy, the one that started it all.
Absolutely. We're going straight to the source, straight to the heart of the machine uprising. We're talking about the Terminator, the 1984 original, then we'll move on to Terminator 2, Judgment Day from 1991, and of course we can't forget Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, which hit screens in 2003. And our goal tonight is to really dig into the Marxist subtext that's buried beneath the surface. We're talking about how these films portray the working class, the dangers of unchecked capitalist innovation, and even the potential for revolution that can be found sometimes in the very tools of oppression.
And to make sure our analysis is, shall we say, as sharp as a freshly honed sickle, we've gathered a whole mountain of source material for this deep dive. We've got reviews from the one and only Roger Ebert, giving us that invaluable contemporary perspective on all three films. And then we've got transcripts from all sorts of YouTube analyses, which give us these really fascinating direct quotes and interpretations from, the creators of these films and the fans who just can't get enough of them. And of course, no deep dive would be complete without IMDb. So we've got synopses, cast and crew details, all that juicy production information, box office numbers to see how well they performed under capitalism, and even some fun trivia to keep things lively.
Oh, and we've also got a couple of sources that really dive deep into the Marxist side of things. One is called Terminator Characters and Marxist Interpretations, which, as you might guess, gives us specific leftist readings of all the key players in this whole robotic drama. And then there's Terminator Films, a Marxist critique, which gives us a really broad, overarching Marxist perspective on the entire franchise. Oh, and we should mention Terminator Franchise Analysis, Themes, Plots, and Reception, which gives us a good overview of how the films were received and how those themes played out.
Right. And all of this is to make sure that you, dear listener, are right there with us in the trenches. We're not just lecturing at you. We want you to be an active participant in this whole Marxist exploration.
Yeah.
We're dissecting these films together.
Yeah.
Just like, a group of revolutionaries analyzing the dominant culture.
Exactly. We're all comrades in this struggle.
Now, let's start by going back to the very beginning. Think about the premise of the first film. You've got this relentless, practically indestructible machine sent back in time to kill a simple working-class waitress. Why her? Because her son, her unborn son, is destined to lead the human resistance against, wait for it, a machine uprising. The very tools of capitalist innovation turned against their creators. Even in this basic setup, right, you can see the seeds of class struggle, the oppression, the potential for revolution.
Oh, absolutely. And, speaking of revolution, one of our sources has actually come up with a brilliant metric for evaluating these films. They call it the hammer and sickle rating. Basically, it measures how effectively these films portray the dynamics of oppression and, importantly, inspire the struggle for liberation.
Love that. A true measure of revolutionary merit. And we'll be revealing those hammer and sickle ratings for each of the first three films as we go along. Should be illuminating, to say the least.
I think so.
Okay, now let's break down the film that started it all, The Terminator from 1984. The film kicks off with the arrival of, two very different dudes in 1984 Los Angeles. And, our trivia buffs out there will be delighted to know that they both arrive, shall we say, in their birthday suits. amidst flashes of blue light and electricity no less. Quite the dramatic entrance. First up, we have the T-800, played with, that iconic stoic intensity by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's a cyborg assassin programmed for one purpose and one purpose only.
Termination.
Exactly. Then we have Kyle Reese, played by the excellent Michael Biehn. He's a soldier sent back from the future, and he's got a very different mission. Right. So the T-800 is after Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton. She's just a normal waitress going about her life, completely unaware that she's the key to the future of humanity. And as our source, I explain all 6 Terminator movies, puts it, the T-800's mission is simple: eliminate Sarah Connor. Reese, on the other hand, is there to protect her. He knows that she's going to give birth to John Connor, the future leader of the resistance against Skynet. And I got to say, those clips we watched really drove home just how relentless and terrifying the Terminator is. There's that line, it can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, it doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop, ever, until you are dead. That sends chills down your spine.
It's a perfect encapsulation of that unstoppable, oppressive force that Sarah, and by extension all of humanity, is up against.
So what does our Marxist critique make of all this?
Well, Terminator films. A Marxist critique argues that the Terminator is essentially the origin story of, as they put it, the capitalist machine going rogue. The Terminator itself becomes a metaphor for the systems of capitalism, right? Mm-hmm. Systems that crush people, not out of malice, but because they're designed to, maximize efficiency and eliminate anything that gets in the way of profit.
And what about Sarah Connor? How does she fit into this Marxist reading?
Initially, Sarah, the working-class waitress, she represents the expendable individual under capitalism. Her life only seems to matter because she can give birth to John, the future leader. It's all about reproduction under capitalism, reducing people to their ability to produce labor, or in this case, a revolutionary leader. But here's the thing. Sarah doesn't just sit back and let things happen to her. She fights back, she defies fate, and ultimately she becomes the revolutionary figure the future needs. She really flips the script, as our source so aptly puts it.
And Kyle Reese, he's often portrayed as this classic hero, the romantic lead even. But the Marxist perspective sees him a bit differently, right?
Yeah. Terminator films. A Marxist critique sees Reese more as a battered survivor of the future war, a war that was a direct result of this unchecked technological advancement. And his relationship with Sarah. It's not some Hollywood romance. It's about solidarity forged in the fires of struggle, this trauma-bonded connection formed under immense pressure.
Speaking of pressure, let's shift gears for a second and talk about how this film was made and how it was received. So The Terminator was directed by the legendary James Cameron, who also co-wrote it with Galen Hurd. Mm-hmm. And of course, we've got our power trio of actors, Schwarzenegger, Hamilton, and Biehn. Now, over on IMDb, it's got a really respectable rating of 8.1 out of 10 and a Metascore of 84, which means the critics generally liked it. And it did well at the award shows, too, winning 8 awards and getting 8 nominations. And here's the thing. It was a box office hit. It cost about $6.4 billion to make, but it grossed over $78 million worldwide. So, even under capitalism, it managed to connect with a pretty wide audience.
It's interesting, isn't it, how even a film with such a revolutionary message can still thrive in the marketplace.
And one of our trivia sources actually pinpointed the location of the Tech-Noir nightclub, which is, this iconic setting for a pivotal scene. It's at 720 S Hill Street in Los Angeles, for those who want to do a little pilgrimage.
Always good to know where the revolution started, right?
Right. And Roger Ebert, in his 2009 review, he called the film all action, all the time. He even compared it to a video game, which, it kind of is in a way. This relentless pursuit, this constant fight for survival.
Very much in line with the film's message about the unstoppable nature of these oppressive forces.
Okay, so there are some truly unforgettable scenes and lines in this film. You got that iconic encounter with the punks. Your clothes, give them to me now. Just blunt, straight to the point. No time for pleasantries when you're on a mission from the future. And then there's Reese explaining what the Terminator is, how it works, how it can't be stopped. And the car chases, oh man, those car chases, they just hammer home the point that you can't outrun fate.
And even that scene with the punks, it's not just there for laughs. Or I explain all 6 Terminator movies. Source points out that it's actually a bit of social commentary. This idea of these punks thinking they can stand up to this force of nature. It's a comment on how disconnected some people are from the real power dynamics at play.
So what's the hammer and sickle rating for the Terminator?
Drum roll, please. Okay, so Terminator films, a Marxist critique, gives it a solid 4 out of 5 hammer and sickles. They call it a brutal, stripped-down metaphor for the unstoppable violence of capital. And they really praise how Sarah transforms from this ordinary worker into a symbol of resistance.
High praise indeed. Now, fast forward 7 years and we get Terminator 2, Judgment Day 1991. A lot of people consider this to be, the peak of the franchise. And it introduces a new threat, a new model of Terminator, the T-1000, played by the awesome Robert Patrick. He's sent back to kill John Connor, who's now a teenager, played by Edward Furlong. But this time, John's got some serious backup.
Our reprogrammed T-800.
Yeah, the same model as before, but now it's on John's side. Talk about turning the tables.
It's a brilliant reversal. And Sarah Connor, she's gone through a huge transformation, too. She's not that scared waitress anymore.
Oh, no. She's been through the ringer. She knows what's coming, and she's ready to fight. But unfortunately, she's been institutionalized, labeled as crazy for trying to warn people about the future.
A classic example of how the system tries to silence dissenting voices, especially when those voices are telling uncomfortable truths.
Right. And this time, the mission isn't just about survival. It's about stopping Judgment Day from happening altogether. And that means taking down Cyberdyne Systems, the company that's developed by the technology that will eventually lead to Skynet. And we meet Miles Dyson, played by Joe Morton, the engineer who's basically the brains behind it all.
And Terminator 2, from a Marxist perspective, it's all about reclaiming the tools of oppression. You've got this machine, the symbol of capitalist violence, and it's been reprogrammed to protect the very people it was designed to eliminate.
Really powerful imagery. And what about John Connor in this film? He's not exactly the typical hero, is he?
No, not at all. The Marxist reading emphasizes that John's a foster kid. He's been marginalized, criminalized even. He's not some chosen one. He's a product of the system. And that makes his eventual leadership even more meaningful. He represents the revolutionary potential that exists within the most marginalized segments of society.
And Sarah. She really goes through it in this film.
Oh, absolutely. The film really highlights how Sarah's criminalized for knowing the truth. She's locked up because she's trying to warn people about the dangers of unchecked technological advancement. It's a metaphor for how the system suppresses revolutionary knowledge, how it tries to silence those who challenge the status quo.
And Cyberdyne, they're not just some evil corporation twirling their mustaches, are they?
No, and that's what makes them so frightening. They're not motivated by malice, but by profit, by the drive to innovate, to secure contracts, to grow. As our source puts it, under capitalism, destruction doesn't require malice, it just requires profit. They're just following the logic of the system, and that logic leads to catastrophic consequences.
Now, production-wise, Terminator 2 was another James Cameron masterpiece, co-written this time with William Wisher. And we've got our returning stars, plus Edward Furlong and Robert Patrick. On IMDb, it's got a whopping 8.6 out of 10 rating and a Metascore of 75, so critically acclaimed. And it cleaned up at the award shows, 4 Oscars, 39 wins in total, 33 nominations. It's considered one of the best films of all time by IMDb. And at the box office, it was a smash hit made on a budget of $102 million, and it grossed over $517 million worldwide.
A true blockbuster, both critically and commercially.
And according to IMDb trivia, the exterior shots of Cyberdyne were filmed at the intersection of Bayside Parkway and Gateway Boulevard in Fremont, California, so if you're ever in the area.
Make sure to pay your respects.
Right.
To the fallen temple of technological overreach.
Exactly. And, Roger Ebert, in his 1991 review, he was really impressed by the relationship between John and the reprogrammed Terminator. He points out how John actually tells the Terminator not to kill people, which is a really interesting twist. And, of course, he praises the special effects, especially the T-1000's liquid metal effects. They were groundbreaking for the time.
Absolutely. And that IMDb user review we looked at, it really sums up the film's enduring appeal. They say, and I quote, "Words cannot describe the greatness of this movie." And they specifically call out the T-1000's effects as incredible beyond belief.
I mean, can you blame them? So many iconic scenes in this film. You've got that line, "Come with me if you want to live," which takes on a whole new meaning when it's the Terminator saying it. And the T-1000's shape-shifting abilities are just visually stunning. And the motorcycle chase with the semi-truck, the assault on Cyberdyne, Sarah's vision of the nuclear holocaust, the Terminator's line about humanity destroying itself, it's all just so well done.
It really is a masterclass in filmmaking.
So what's the hammer and sickle rating for this masterpiece?
5 out of 5, a perfect score. Terminator films. A Marxist critique calls it a masterpiece of Marxist sci-fi. They love how it shows the working class resisting, how it repurposes the tools of oppression, and how it exposes the violence inherent in the pursuit of progress.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, let's move on to 2003 and Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. This time we've got a new Terminator, the TX, also known as the Terminatrix, played by Kristanna Loken, her target. John Connor, now played by Nick Stahl, and his future wife, Kate Brewster, played by Claire Danes. But John's not alone. He's got another T-800, good old Arnold, sent back to protect him. But this film has a bit of a darker twist.
Yeah, it turns out that Judgment Day wasn't actually prevented in T2, it was just delayed. And now, Skynet's coming online through the internet.
The internet. Can't live with it, can't stop the apocalypse without it.
Right. And Terminator 3, it really leans into this idea of inevitability. The system always finds a way, you know? It adapts, it evolves, and it just keeps coming. It's this really bleak commentary on the power of these systems to resist change.
And John Connor, he's not the same optimistic leader we saw in T2.
No, he's disillusioned, he's lost, he's almost given up. He represents that sense of despair that can set in when you realize how hard it is to actually change the system.
And the new Terminator, the TX, how does she fit into all of this?
Well, she represents, as our source puts it, hyper-efficient killing. She's like automation on steroids, and the fact that she's coded as feminine adds another layer to it. It plays into these ideas about gender and power, how even technology can be used to reinforce existing hierarchies.
And Skynet itself has changed, too.
Right. It's not just some computer in a building anymore. It's everywhere. It's online. It's this decentralized network that's practically impossible to shut down.
A perfect metaphor for late-stage capitalism.
Exactly. It's not about physical control anymore. It's about this all-encompassing system of ideas and information that permeates every aspect of our lives.
So Terminator 3 was directed by Jonathan Mostow, and the screenplay was written by John Brancato, Michael Ferris, and Teddy Serafian. I've got Schwarzenegger, obviously, plus Nick Stahl and Claire Danes. This one got a bit of a mixed reception, a 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb and a Metascore of 69. It won a couple of awards, but didn't do as well as its predecessors. And at the box office, it did okay, but not great. Made on a budget of $200 million, it grossed over $433 million worldwide.
Not a flop by any means, but definitely a step down from T2.
And Roger Ebert, in his 2003 review, he said it was a skillful piece of work, but that it didn't have the same intrigue as the earlier films. He wasn't too impressed by the TX. He called her a mannequin who keeps on coming. He also felt the ending was a bit weak. And of course, he mentions the obligatory "she'll be back" line.
Gotta keep the franchise going somehow, right?
Right. So, Terminator 3, some memorable moments, but not quite as impactful as the first two. The TX's arrival is a bit more flashy, less gritty. The whole film feels a bit more, I don't know, Hollywood, conged maybe. And the TX's shape-shifting abilities, they're there, but they're not as impressive as the T-1000s.
They don't have that same wow factor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, what's the final verdict? What's the hammer and sickle rating for Terminator 3?
3.5 out of 5. Terminator films. A Marxist critique says it's still got some good stuff, you know? It's got metaphors for systemic violence, for the inevitability of oppression, but they feel like it loses some of its nuance by focusing so much on fate and not enough on the potential for collective action.
Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag, but still worth watching. Now, for those of you who want to revisit these films or see them for the first time, Roger Ebert's reviews mentioned that they were all streaming on various platforms at the time he wrote them. But you know, the streaming landscape changes so fast, it's probably best to just check your favorite services and see what's available.
Yeah, definitely do your own research before you start streaming.
So as we wrap up part 1 of our Terminator deep dive, what are the key takeaways here?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the Terminator series, especially the first 3 films, they're ripe for Marxist analysis. They offer a lot of insight into how capitalism works, how technology can be used for both good and evil, and how the working class can resist oppression. The Terminator really sets the stage, showing us the brutal reality of capital and the possibility of revolution. Terminator 2 gives us this amazing vision of the oppressed fighting back, reclaiming the tools of their oppression, and actually winning, at least for a while. And then Terminator 3, it brings us back down to earth a bit, reminding us that the system is powerful and adaptable, and that even when you think you've won, the fight might not be over.
Right. And the characters themselves, they embody all these different aspects of the struggle. You've got Sarah Connor, who starts out as this ordinary worker and becomes this powerful revolutionary figure. You've got Kyle Reese, who's this traumatized survivor fighting for a better future. You've got John Connor, who represents the hope and later the disillusionment of the working class. And you've got the Terminators themselves, these machines that could be both instruments of oppression and, in the case of the reprogrammed T-800, tools of liberation.
And the films really force us to confront some tough questions about our own society, about the role of technology, the power of corporations, and the potential for change.
Absolutely. So, as you continue to think about these films, dear listener, we want you to consider this. Are we in our own time any closer to preventing our own judgment day? And what role does collective action play in shaping our future? Are we just cogs in the machine, or can we rewrite the code?
Join us next time, comrades, as we continue our journey through the Terminator saga, looking at salvation, Genesis, and Dark Fate. We'll be exploring how these later films deal with the themes of resistance, co-option, and the changing face of the machine.
This has been Marxists at the Movies. Stay vigilant, stay critical, and never give up the fight.
Scene opens, white lights dim down low.
Thank you for listening to the Marxists at the Movies podcast.
Cinema whispers
Don't forget to
where
like and
truth can
comment.
grow. From shadows deep and screens ignite, the proletariat comes alive tonight. Marxists at the movies, bright and raw, breaking through the reels to rewrite the law. Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting the name. Popcorn power and the working class